Alright, just a quick update today. I was got to thinking about my previous videos talking about popping these circuit grounds off. I didn't want anybody to make any mistakes on what I was saying there, so I think I'd demonstrate a little bit more clearly exactly what I meant. It's a two-piece connection. The solder is between this a vertical piece, which is this wider piece, like a cross here. Well, I guess it's a narrower piece actually. That's connected to the chassis underneath, and then there's this stake here, which comes up from the PC board and has a 90-degree bend in it, and it fits down inside a slot on this stake that's attached to the metal part of the chassis. And the idea here is if you just take your soldering iron, put it right at the junction, just on top of that, what you're really trying to do is soften that solder up, and then applying pressure from the bottom through that little access hole I mentioned. This bent piece will just pop right out of this little slot that's cut in this cross section here. You don't want to actually bend this stake. You don't want any damages at all, because this is soldered to the PC board, and you don't really want to, stress that joint out. In fact, I was very careful to examine to make sure there was still a good solder connection between this bent over stake and the PC board itself. Anyway, that's just a clarification of the circuit grounds. Another interesting thing came up. Got this. I was wondering about this orange and white wire early on, and this tacked together joint right here. It's a flying junction. They had a J-hook thing there. I thought, well, that's interesting. I wonder why they did that. I didn't really give it too much thought. I assumed maybe somebody disconnected the wire to move the PC board. Didn't really make any sense. Well, if you also recall earlier on, I was talking about this can didn't look original, and it's not. It's a 40-40-80. Sorry, what's supposed to be there is a 200, which is for the doubler, an 80, which is the filter, and then two 10s, which are filter slash decouplers, whatever you want to call it, on the lower voltage power supplies. So the 80 is correct, but for the fact that they're using the 80 here as the doubler supply instead of the 200, one of the 40s is being used as the output filter, which should be an 80, and one of the other 40 is supposed to be a 10 on one of the voltages. And guess what? There's supposed to be a 4-section, which there's not, which is a 3-section cap. That's where this used to connect up. So this was down here, some sort of like this, attached to one of the sections. So we've essentially got they call it the 140 volt. You can't really read that here. Let me see if you can see that. Well, right where that wire hooks up, there's a little notation, 140 volts. The 140 volt supply is just connected to the 3000 ohm power resistor, which then goes back to the 275 volt source from the output from the doubler. So there's basically no filter cap attached to that at all. That supplies the IF, and I'm not sure what else it supplies, but I don't think it's ever a good form to just go unilaterally re-engineering something. Say what you want to about Philco. I honestly think they would probably want some of the better engineered products. If you look at any of their early radios, they use a plethora of decoupling caps, where other sets cheapen out a little bit. I think the engineering on Philco is actually pretty good. Sometimes the execution wasn't great, and the use of PC boards on power tubes like this, not a good idea. It should be on a metal chassis because they heat. But the actual circuits, when they're working, it makes a really good picture. So I don't have any beef with their engineering. And the idea that somebody would just unilaterally decide, oh, I don't need that capacitor there, well, that's not a very good idea at all. And maybe it works without it. Maybe the symptoms that pop up are not bad. Maybe it only works if there's a strong signal or something like that. I don't know. I don't know why it's done, but anyway, it's foolish to just disconnect it. So right now my goal is I'm going to pull this can out. I'm trying to locate, I have a stash of old caps that I use for donors. Get a 4-section donor. I'll cut it off right here at the shoulder. I'll put in the correct capacitors into the donor piece, and then I'll reconnect up everything. I like to put the capacitors back into the can. I'm not going to bother with putting the cap back on, because it just floats here. It's only mounted on the base, so I don't really care that the caps will be exposed. It's not that I'm all about how it looks, because who cares really? But what I do care about is keeping the capacitors in the same relative area, using the same kind of connection through terminals on the bottom of the cans as it was original. I know a lot of people will mount them with terminal strips or find some other place, you know, like you could put a cap, you could put a doubler over here, you know, between here and the ground. You could do that. You could probably connect a capacitor directly from here to the ground, you know. There's a lot of things you could do, and I've seen that done. It's not anything wrong with it. You know, that's fine. If I was doing this professionally to make money, I would probably do that, because it's certainly a lot quicker than bothering with trying to remove this and pull the top off and connect two new capacitors and it'd probably take at least twice as long to do that as just tacking caps in where they need to be and disconnecting this completely. So, I mean, I understand. I'm certainly not giving anybody a beef who does that. But the only problem I have with that is, for the next poor slob that works on this thing, you know, long after, you know, Dave's world is faded distant history, I hate it when I get other people's work and I'm trying to figure out what on earth did they do. Because you have to always ask yourself, did it ever work? Did all these tacked in caps ever fix the problem? Did it produce a good picture? I mean, if you saw it working and you knew it was fine, then that would be one thing. But you often inherit these things without knowledge of its prior, you know, working status. So you get a set that's got a bunch of hacked in fixes, or just different fixes. I guess it shouldn't be critical of saying hacked in. You don't know if it really worked or not. So then you got to kind of go back and review all their engineering to see if it makes any sense. If you keep everything original, then it's a lot easier to say, well, I know what the schematic says, and I know this is how it was originally wired, so there's a much better chance that, you know, that's not going to be a problem. Anyway, that's my philosophy on why I like to try to keep the cans in place and use the terminals on the bottom of the cans, and, you know, keep all the wiring as close to original as possible, just so you don't have to try to figure out things like this. Okay, here's somebody's idea of a fix. You know, I didn't even realize this was a problem until I noticed that was a 3-section cap. And I said, well, where's the 4th section? I saw, oh, the 4th section is on the 140 volt source. And I said, well, where's the 140 volt source? It's on this resistor. And I said, aha. All of a sudden it made sense. That was just disconnected from this terminals on the cap, pulled up and soldered together. Anyway, so that's the two things I want to bring up in this one here. The solder stakes, don't overheat, and don't clip or screw up this bent thin part here, because that's soldered to the PC board. You don't want to induce any stress. Just apply a good hot soldering iron is all it takes, and then you can pop that off. And that was my main reason for doing this video. Anyway, if I can ever find a 4-section cap, which I got a boatload of them, but I just can't find my my donor box right now. I guess my worst case scenario is, if I can't find it, what I'll do is I'll take this cap off, cut it, and I'll use the 3 terminals, and the 4th terminal I'll just have one of the wires from the capacitors sticking straight through, and then I'll pigtail onto that. At least it'll be connected to the capacitor. It won't have a real terminal, but, you know, I'm not going to go out and try to find a 4-section if I don't have it readily available. I'd rather just go ahead and deal with this and use this. But, you know, hopefully I can find my box of donor caps. Anyway, more later.